There's a moment you'll never forget, not because it was loud, but because it left you speechless. Someone questioned you, attacked your character, twisted your intentions, and you reacted. You tried to explain, to be understood, to fix the damage. And somehow, you still lost, because the moment you defended yourself, you admitted they had the power to judge you. And that was the real defeat. You wanted fairness, but what you walked into was a game of control, and the truth is, the more you explain, the more guilty you look, the more you clarify, the smaller you become. And no one ever taught you the rule you broke. Those who defend, submit. So what if you stopped explaining? What if your silence became the sharpest answer they couldn't handle? What if you learned how to flip the frame before it frames you? That's why you're here, and this time, you won't flinch. Most people lose power not when they're wrong, but when they try too hard to prove they're right. Think about it. You've been in that room before. Someone says something off, passive-aggressive, maybe even unfair. Your instinct, defend, clarify, prove you're not what they say. Because we're raised to believe defense equals strength, that if we speak up, we'll regain control. But here's the truth no one told you. The second you explain yourself, you step into their arena, you accept their framing. You tell them, without knowing, you have the right to judge me, and once they own that power, you're done. Not because what they said was true, but because you gave their words authority. Let's pause here. What do you really want when you defend yourself? Is it clarity, or is it control? You say, I just want to be understood, but underneath that, you want them to stop questioning you. You want them to back off. You want to take back the upper hand. And that's where it gets dangerous, because if your power depends on their permission to stop attacking, then you never had power to begin with. Let me tell you about Alina. She runs a fast-growing tech company in Austin. Sharp mind, zero nonsense. But early on, she was called cold, unapproachable, bossy. She used to explain herself. She'd say things like, "Oh, that wasn't my intention," or "I just want to push the team harder." And every time she did, it got worse. The labels stuck. The judgment deepened. Her power leaked away until one day she stopped defending. A new hire threw a jab in a meeting. Said, "I guess some of us don't care how they make others feel." The room went still. Alina said nothing. She didn't even blink. She turned a page in her notebook, let the silence stretch, and everyone, every single person in that room, started questioning the one who spoke, not her. That's what happens when you stop defending. You shift the burden. You let the other person sit with the weight of their own words, and suddenly they don't feel powerful. They feel exposed. So let me be clear, defending yourself isn't always about truth. It's about reaction, and reaction is vulnerability. You might win the argument, but you lose the dynamic. That's why this isn't about ego. It's about energy. Who's controlling the room? Who's forcing who to respond? And once you respond, you're following, not leading. Here's the shift. You don't need to be liked. You need to be respected. And respect isn't earned by apologizing for your presence. It's earned when you sit still, so still that the whole room feels it. So the next time someone calls you arrogant, smile softly. Let it land, say nothing, because if it stings, you give them power, but if it echoes and dies, you own the frame. Now let's take this deeper. What happens when silence becomes not just a reaction, but a presence? And what if your stillness said everything you needed, without a single word? Power doesn't belong to the loudest voice in the room. It belongs to the one who sets the frame. You've seen this play out, haven't you? Two people walk into the same meeting. One talks fast, tries to prove their point, listens to argue, needs approval. The other sits back, watches, speaks only once, but every word lands like a hammer. That second person, they hold the frame, they decide what matters. They don't enter the discussion, they redefine it. And that is the real game. Let me break it down. Frame is perception. It's the invisible lens through which everyone sees what's happening, and whoever controls that lens controls the meaning. Let's talk about Liam, a rising politician in London, brilliant mind, but always defending himself. always correcting headlines, always tweeting clarifications. At first, it looked strong, transparent, honest, but over time, people started seeing him as unstable, as insecure, because every time he explained himself, he confirmed that someone else had the power to define him. Then there's Harold, chairman of a billion-dollar energy firm, almost never speaks in public, never responds to rumors, but when he walks into a room, the room holds its breath. Why? Because no one's sure what he's thinking. They only know. He's never needed to explain. That's frame control, not about dominating others, but being so anchored in your own sense of self that others have no choice but to orbit around it. When you react, you're in their frame. When you stay still, they're in yours. Think of it like a stage. They throw a line at you, hoping you'll step into their play, but you don't even enter the scene, and the audience starts to wonder if the line was even worth saying, because here's the secret. The audience always watches the one who isn't trying too hard. The moment you flinch, they shift focus, not to your defense, but to your weakness. So if you want power, stop trying to win the argument. Win the attention, and the way you do that is by mastering one thing: composure, not forced calm. Not fake confidence, but real, unshakable stillness. That kind of presence rewrites the frame without needing to speak. And that's the turning point, when others start to define you not by what you say, but by what you don't. You're not the one chasing the story, you become the story. So when someone tries to bait you, pause. Tilt your head, say nothing, let the weight of your silence become the stage itself, because when you master the frame, you don't just change the conversation, you become the one everyone's trying to read, and no one attacks what they don't understand. Not because they admire it, but because they fear it. Now what if you didn't just hold the frame, but made others lose theirs completely? That's where we're going next. Most people think silence is weakness. That if you say nothing, you're losing. That if you don't fight back, you're surrendering. But they've been lied to, because silence, when used with presence, is the loudest move you can make. Let me tell you about Marcus. He runs one of the most respected venture firms in New York. Sharp, calculated, rarely ever speaks in meetings, unless it matters. At a high-stakes pitch meeting, a young founder threw a subtle insult his way, something like, "Some people in this room may be too old to see where innovation is headed." Everyone froze, waiting to see what Marcus would do, waiting for a clever comeback, a shutdown, a stare down. But Marcus, he blinked slowly, closed the leather folder in front of him, and leaned back. He didn't smirk, he didn't speak, he just waited. 10 seconds passed, then 20. The founder shifted in his seat, tried to explain it was a joke. Tried to walk it back, but the damage was already done to himself, because the more Marcus stayed silent, the more the room turned against the speaker, not out of loyalty, but because they could feel the shift. Marcus didn't need to speak. His silence was pressure, his calm was louder than any insult, and here's why it worked. When you respond to an insult, you validate it, you give it weight, you tell the room, this deserves my energy. But when you let it pass, unchallenged, untouched, you shrink its power, you make the attacker look emotional, reactive, insecure. Silence isn't retreat, it's a decision, and in power games, the one who decides when to speak owns the room. But let's go deeper. There's a reason silence breaks people. It doesn't give them what they crave, because most attacks, they're not about truth, they're about bait. They want you to flinch, to react, to prove you're hurt when you don't. You trap them in their own energy. They throw fire and watch it burn in empty air. Eventually, they look around, realizing no one else caught the flame, and they are left holding the match. That's the moment everything turns. Because now they feel exposed, and you didn't have to lift a finger. That's what Marcus understood. That's what power looks like. It's not about dominance, it's about stillness, about not needing to explain, about letting the weight of the moment do the talking. Because people remember silence. They remember when someone didn't fight and still won. So next time someone throws shade, don't react, don't explain, don't defend, just be still. Let them feel the silence. Let them panic in their own echo. Let them wonder why their words didn't land. And when they look at you for a reaction, give them none. That's when they realize they just handed you the power. And you didn't even have to speak. But here's where it gets colder. What if, instead of silence, you gave them something worse? Your absence, not just unbothered, but unreachable. Let's go there. Most people crumble not when they're confronted, but when they're ignored, because silence doesn't just remove attention, it removes oxygen. And when someone comes at you looking for a fight, the worst thing you can do is give them nothing to fight with. No reaction, no reply, just stillness. And something strange happens. They start talking to themselves. At first, it's subtle, a second jab, a half laugh to the room. They're trying to keep control of the moment, but the silence stretches. No one joins them, no one laughs. And the longer you say nothing, the more uncomfortable they become, because people don't attack you to defeat you. They attack you to see you squirm, and when you don't, they panic. Let's talk psychology. The human brain hates open loops. When it throws out a trigger and gets no reaction, it spirals, it repeats, it escalates. It's why interrogators use silence more than shouting, because eventually the subject cracks, not from pressure, but from the unbearable tension of having no response. And that same dynamic plays out every day, in boardrooms, in friend groups, on social media. They attack, you stay calm. They escalate, you stay silent. And in their need to get something, anything, they start unraveling. It begins with repetition. They say the same thing again, but louder, more dramatic, more exaggerated. Then they look around for backup, trying to pull others into the energy. But when no one joins, they look desperate, like they're fighting a battle no one asked for. And you, still, composed, untouched. That's when the crowd starts to shift. They're no longer listening to the words, they're watching the energy. And energy never lies. You said nothing, but you now look powerful. They said everything, and now look unstable. That's the reversal, that's the flip. It's not about being right, it's about being unmoved. And the more unshakable you appear, the more pressure builds on them, because silence, used properly, turns mirrors into magnifying glasses. And the attacker, they start seeing themselves, every weakness, every insecurity, every overreach, amplified, exposed, echoed in a room that isn't clapping. Now imagine this. You walk into a meeting, someone tosses a subtle dig. All eyes turn to you, but you don't take the bait. You breathe, you wait, you glance briefly, then return to your focus. No smirk, no stare, just stillness. And suddenly, the room starts watching them, not you, because you gave no friction, no reaction. You made them perform their own collapse. And the best part, they did it all by themselves, not because you outsmarted them, but because you didn't need to. You let their own emotions eat the stage. That's what silence can do. But what if you took it even further? What if you didn't just ignore the attack? You disappeared entirely. What if you became untouchable? Let's go deeper. There's a silence that's heavier than words, but there's another silence, the kind that leaves a void. A disappearance, not absence out of fear, but absence as a move, as a weapon. Let me introduce you to Sophie, a fashion entrepreneur based in LA. Built her brand from scratch, clean, powerful, minimal, just like her online presence. But one day, she was dragged hard. A former partner posted accusations, screenshots, half-truths, emotional captions. It caught fire, thousands of comments, articles, even friends stayed quiet. And what did Sophie do? Nothing. No response, no apology, no setting the record straight. She simply stopped posting. No story, no statement. She vanished. 3 days passed, then a week. People kept talking, but without her presence, they had nothing to bounce off of. The noise got louder, then uncertain, then bored. Commenters turned on each other. Speculation ran dry. The person who posted first started posting again, trying to reignite the drama. But now it looked desperate, because Sophie wasn't losing. She wasn't even playing. 2 weeks later, she returned. One photo, no caption, no hashtags, just her standing still. The comments filled with admiration, sympathy, people saying, she didn't even have to explain, she's class, she won. And that's the truth. She didn't win by proving she was right. She won by being too powerful to chase after noise. That's what disappearance can do, because when you remove yourself, you force the world to feel your absence. They don't just wonder where you went, they wonder why they can't stop thinking about it. See, most people survive on emotional attention. Even negative attention is still fuel, but when you disappear, you shut off the supply, the attacker spirals. They post more, louder, wilder, they DM others, try to pull you back in, and every time they speak without a reply, they lose ground. They start looking obsessed, unstable, and the longer you're gone, the smaller they look, because you didn't block them. Didn't argue, didn't explain, you just became unreachable, and that is where real fear is born. Because people can handle resistance, they can handle a fight, but when they hit air, when they throw shade into a void, they crumble. Not because they were defeated, but because they were ignored by someone who no longer lives in their world. So ask yourself, do you need to respond, or do you need to vanish long enough to let their narrative burn out without you? Because silence is powerful, but absence is myth, and no one attacks a myth twice now. What if instead of disappearing, you flipped the script even harder? What if you made their accusation look like their own insecurity? Let's take the blade and turn it back. They call you arrogant. You smile, not wide. Just enough to let the silence stretch, then say, strange how confidence makes people uncomfortable. And just like that, the accusation turns on itself. Because here's the truth no one wants to admit, most attacks are projections. They don't come from truth, they come from discomfort, from someone seeing strength and mistaking it for threat. So instead of defending, you reflect. You become a mirror, not to agree, not to fight, but to let them see what they're really saying. Let's break this down. Every time someone says, you're manipulative, you're fake, you're full of yourself, they're not trying to uncover truth. They're trying to bring you down to a level they can manage, because your presence, your stillness, your confidence, it unsettles them. It reminds them of what they don't control, and that's what you need to understand. When you flip the accusation, you don't just protect your position, you expose their motive. Imagine this. Someone tells you, you think you're better than everyone. Instead of denying it, you lean back and say, no. I just don't think like everyone. No heat, no edge, just a statement, sharp, clean, final, and suddenly they're on the back foot. Because now they're the ones explaining, now they're the ones defending. That's the reversal, not by yelling louder, but by making their attack look like the emotional outburst it always was. Because here's what most people miss. The more emotional someone gets during an accusation, the more unstable they look. So your job. Stay calm, stay cool, stay exact. No long rants, no over-explaining, just sharp truth, delivered with detachment. Examples. Let's say they call you controlling. You reply, only those who fear influence call it control. They say you're fake. You say, everyone says that after they stop getting what they want. These aren't defenses, they're flips. And flips change power, because now they're the ones in the spotlight. They're the ones justifying themselves. And you're still, you're sharp, you're untouchable. Remember this, defense is reaction, but flips are strategy. They don't say, I'm not what you claim. They say, you just revealed more about you than you ever did about me. And when you master this, you never need to attack, you just redirect, and watch them fall on their own emotion. Now ask yourself, what if every insult was really just an invitation to show them who's actually in control? Let's step into that. They say reputation is everything, but that's not true. A good reputation that makes you safe, predictable, easy to read, easy to reach. But a strong reputation, one built on presence, mystery, restraint, that makes you untouchable, because when people don't know how you'll respond, they get cautious. When they're cautious, they lose momentum, and that's where power lies. In the space between what they expect and what you don't give them. let's take this into the real world. Imagine you're at a dinner table. Someone throws a jab, not cruel, but just sharp enough to sting. You always need to be right, don't you? Everyone hears it. Forks pause, eyes shift, and you don't laugh, you don't argue, you don't flinch. You wait, you scan the room, not with offense, but with calm. 2 seconds, 3, then you tilt your head slightly and say, interesting take. No heat, no defense, just enough to shift the room, and what happens? The one who attacked you fidgets, laughs nervously, starts explaining, because the spotlight just moved, they created tension, but you didn't carry it, you made them hold it alone. And people felt it, not just heard it, felt it. See, in social settings, people don't follow logic. They follow energy, and calm energy wins every time. But let's be honest, this isn't just about one-liners, it's about aura, the energy you bring. The way you enter a room, the way you speak less, but mean more, that's what earns silent respect. Not approval, not popularity, wait, because when you stop defending yourself, people stop testing you, not because they understand you, but because they fear they never will. And here's the paradox. The more you explain, the more predictable you become. And the more predictable you are, the easier you are to control. So instead, let them misread you, let them wonder. Let them think they won, while they're still watching your silence for clues, because power isn't built by being clear. It's built by being calm and unreadable, a quiet tension, a pause that makes others talk more just to fill the space. That's when you know you don't need to be the loudest voice, you just need to be the voice they can't stop listening for. And now the question becomes, what kind of reputation do you really want? One that makes you loved? Or one that makes them hesitate before they ever speak your name? Let's step into that hesitation. There's a moment when the room goes quiet, and it's not because someone won the argument, it's because someone refused to play. That's what happens. When your silence gains weight, when your presence says, I don't need to respond, because I don't recognize your authority to ask. Let's go back. You're in a group, conversation flowing, someone throws a public jab, light, sarcastic. Everyone hears it. You always have something clever to say, don't you? And now pause. Most would laugh awkwardly. Defend, explain, try to soften the tension. But you don't flinch, you don't shift, you hold still, your eyes stay calm. Maybe you tilt your head, maybe you give a slow blink, or maybe you just stay silent. And that moment says more than any words ever could, because now the room isn't watching the jab, it's watching your stillness, and that stillness, it becomes gravity. The attacker starts to fidget. They feel the energy turn on them, not because you attacked, but because you didn't. You refuse to be pulled into their frame. You let them perform alone, and the more they speak, the more exposed they become, because here's the secret. People don't judge based on facts, they judge based on behavior. On energy, on posture. If you stay calm, they assume control. If you panic, they assume guilt. It's not fair, but it's real. And when others see you holding still under fire, they start to question the fire. They wonder, oh, why isn't he defending himself? Oh, why isn't she flustered? Did the accusation even matter? That's when something unexpected happens. Others start defending you. They say, that was unnecessary. He didn't even respond. You're making this a bigger deal than it is. And now they've become your shield. You didn't ask, you didn't campaign, you didn't prove anything. You simply held, and by holding, you triggered something deeper, tribe instinct. The crowd always sides with the one who looks most composed, because composure signals strength, and strength feels safe to follow. But there's more. When people defend you without being asked, you're no longer just respected, you're elevated, because now your power doesn't come from dominance, it comes from discipline. That's the real lesson. The more you control yourself, the more others feel the urge to protect you, not out of pity, but out of reverence. You didn't just win the moment. You shifted the room, without lifting your voice, without breaking eye contact, without giving in, and that's not silence. That's command. Now imagine if every room you walked into felt that shift, not because of who you spoke to, but because of what you refused to chase. That's the level we're reaching next. This is where everything changes, when you stop defending. When you stop chasing, when you stop reacting to noise, and start shaping silence into power. Because silence isn't the absence of speech, it's the presence of control, and the deeper you move into that, the less you need to prove. The less you need to explain. Your posture becomes your reply, your calm becomes your stance, and your restraint becomes your armor. Look around. The people you truly respect, the ones who hold weight when they walk into a room. They don't talk much, they don't argue, they don't clear up rumors, they don't panic when misunderstood. They are misunderstood by design. Because once you master stillness, misunderstanding becomes a strategy. It lets others project their own fear. While you stay rooted in your clarity, you don't flinch, you don't chase perception, you define it. And that's the shift. You no longer live in defense, you live in definition. You define your image, you define your pace, you define your silence. And others feel that. They feel it in how you don't blink under fire, how you speak less but say more, how your presence creates a pause, not from fear, but from awareness, because unpredictability isn't chaos, it's power. When people can't read you, they can't reach you, and when they can't reach you, they adjust themselves in your presence. You don't chase status, you become the still point they orbit around. That's when you've won, not because you silenced your critics, but because they ran out of things to say, because nothing lands on someone who's no longer trying to be understood. You let the noise echo in empty space, you let the attacks burn out without fuel, and what's left is not defense, it's dominance. So from this moment forward, don't fight for approval, don't explain your value, don't defend your silence. Let your stillness speak, let your absence echo, let your calm carry more weight than their loudest insult. Because in a world that rewards overreaction, the one who stays still rules. You've crossed the line. You've become the one they can't shake, can't predict, can't break, not because you shouted, not because you struck back, but because when they tried to pull you in, you didn't move. That's not passivity, that's command. And now the game has flipped. They don't want to argue with you anymore. They want to be the one you never had to explain yourself to. That's the final level. You don't need defense. You are the definition.